Hi, everybody. Welcome to Our Sinclair. I'm John.
And I'm Aaron.
And today we're going to be talking about Paperboy.
All right.
Did you ever have a paper route back in the day?
No. I know. I did not. In fact, when this game came out, I was only vaguely familiar with the concept of kids delivering a paper.
It's funny because you and I both grew up in the same town, and we're a rural area that does not have a lot of bike-friendly areas,
yeah.
I would say. And the concept of a boy delivering papers, I've never seen in person in my life. We always had just some dude in a pickup truck. He didn't even have an official postal vehicle. It was just some guy.
Yeah, most in West Virginia, you would have to have. You couldn't take bikes up and down these mountains. You would never make it. No. And you would also, if it's 2 or 3 miles to get to the neighbor, that's a lot. How many people?
You're not going to be making. You're not going to make a lot of money doing that.
Yeah, I don't think I ever saw a delivery boy here. Now I will say I knew when I lived up on the mountain. I role played with we did D&D with a girl who delivered the Gazette. In her car. Yeah. And she was, in fact, she got made the headlines by saving someone during her route. She saved somebody's life.
Really?
Yeah, during her route. She was actually featured in the paper she delivered. So that was kind of neat. Just like the Paperboy, I guess, was.
Do you remember when the Gazette merged with the Daily Mail?
I do. Was it the Mail that they merged with?
Yeah, because the Gazette was the morning paper and the Daily Mail was the evening paper.
It's amazing. They're lucky that we've got most places they'll have a real vibrant, our papers are still going okay.
I subscribed to the paper for a while in digital form. I actually paid money because I was like, I want to support local journalism. It was horrible. The writing was horrible. I got better reporting and faster reporting on WSAZ.com. So that was the end of my supporting the local journalists.
I never really, we used to get the paper, and my parents still get the Sunday paper. I don't know if they get the dailies. Mm-hmm. I used to read the funnies.
Yeah,
that's all I did. The funny paper. That's the rest of it I didn't care about.
I liked on Sundays the funnies were in color.
Yeah,
that was all good. Yeah. It was all good.
And then when I got older, I'd read the sports section. Mm-hmm. See box scores, see what the standings were in baseball and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's funny because I read all the time, and I get The Economist. I read news magazines, but there's just I don't know. I just couldn't get it. There's so much of the daily paper that's just fluff. It's not hard hitting. It's Dear Abby. It's gardening columns, and
it's tough to have it. I've been waiting for this technology, the technology that we heard about with the bendable, foldable screen.
Sure, the e-paper.
And my thing was what you do to save because one of the problems that people don't get is there's a tactile pleasure in reading the paper.
Yeah.
To a certain degree, and what you need is something that is similar that you could use. And what I'd like to see is a large, flexible screen, and then every day the paper just appears on it. And instead of flipping through it like this, you just kind of hit a button and it just changes. And but you can still hold it. You can take it to the can or whatever if you read your paper.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But
however, I disagree. I mean, I don't enjoy reading the newspaper because the size is always sort of unmanageable. You kind of have to fold it in a weird way. I'd like to get a newspaper in a magazine format.
Well, I mean,
I realize at that point it's not the paper.
I'd want something bigger than a tablet, but I can maybe slightly smaller than a full-size paper. I can understand that.
Yeah. I guess I don't really have anything else to talk about with newspapers.
You never delivered papers.
I never delivered papers.
You never delivered grit.
I never did. Did you ever submit anything for publication? Did you ever write an angry letter to the editor?
I never did. No, I've written tons of angry stuff on the net, but not.
Who hasn't?
Not
That's what the internet is for.
Nothing. I never read anything in the paper that really made me angry. To be honest with you, I don't know. I don't get that worked up about stuff, so that's probably why.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Paperboy, Aaron.
I do get worked up about this because this is a game that I grew up. Well, yeah, I sort of grew up playing it. It appeared long ago. So before we get to the actual specky version, let's touch on the arcade version of Paperboy. But now, this game debuted way back in April of 1985. That's a long. Did you realize it was that old?
Yeah, I knew it was from '85.
And this one was on the Atari System 2 hardware, which I, as I mentioned before, we owned that. So we didn't have Paperboy though.
So the System 2 games, Marble Madness was part of that.
Roadrunner, Road Blasters.
This was really, I think, the last era of arcade games where they were really trying to attract your non-traditional gaming audience. I remember reading about the development of these System 2 games, and Atari gave its developers sort of carte blanche to try any non-traditional idea they could think of to lure more people into the arcade.
Yeah, and they did come up with something like another one was the Temple of Doom was on that setup. You had a lot of wacky games on the System 2.
I think Return of the Jedi was on System 2, wasn't it?
You may be right. I think you may be right. So this game debuted in the arcades, like I said, in '85 in North America anyway. And so you take on the role of a paperboy delivering papers to the local houses. Now, in the arcade, famously, this game came as a stand-up arcade game. Now, I never saw anything but the stand-up. I don't think there was a cockpit.
I don't think there was a cockpit.
And it had handlebars attached to the arcade machine, and you'd actually literally drive your bike by moving the handlebars. It was so super unique, and you couldn't help but see it when you walked. I mean, there was one of those games that you automatically caught your eye because it was so unusual. And then it had nice crisp graphics, and they were three-dimensional looking graphics. Again, this is '85, so this game had unbelievable sound and graphics. It had digitized sound.
There was a huge jump between '84, let's say '83 and '85.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There was a major league jump, and this game was super popular. I mean, I saw these things everywhere. So Paperboy was in every arcade, had it. You'd see it in even the small arcades or a 7-Eleven. You know, it was real popular. I mean, it must have been a huge hit for Atari. I can only assume. I started collecting arcade games way back, and I guess it would have been 96, 95, something like that. And Paperboy was one that I almost got. I went to there was a local arcade in my house called Tony's, and I talked to Tony and I asked him if he had any arcade games that he was looking to sell, and he did. And I was like, well, great, where are they? He goes, well, come over to my house and you can come take a look at them. And I went over there, and we went out, and to my chagrin and surprise, we went out to his barn. And in his barn, on the hay-covered floor, was a collection of arcade machines.
People talk about barn finds all the time in our hobby, in the arcade collecting hobby. You actually had a legitimate barn find.
Well, these were barn finds, because amongst the things in this barn was a stand-up Star Wars, the Vector game. There was a couple of asteroids. There was what was the other one he had? He had like, it was probably about 10 games. I think he had an Omega Race, and I think there was also a Virtua Fighter was out there too. Kind of give you an idea.
So a pretty nice variety of games,
right?
Too.
I mean, it was. I mean, he had but they were all sitting on a hay barn floor.
Yeah, probably.
So you knew what was going to happen there.
Killer water damage.
But Paperboy was there, and at the time I said, "Listen, because I was looking to I wanted some bargain basement action." And I said, Tony, what are you asking for people? And I remember, as I recall, he wanted, it was either $450 or $650, which was ludicrous, I thought.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'll think about it. And I never ever went back over there to get it.
But it just goes to show, even back in the day, Paperboy was a very desirable game.
Yeah, and now, well, I mean, it wasn't $600 desirable. Right. I would have paid, say, $250 at that time, but there's no way I'd pay $450 or $600.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So it came close to getting one, but it's always been a fun game. Now, I do have an Atari hard driving game, and I think they have a similar control mechanism. I've never actually popped the top. I mean, if you look at a System 2 arcade machine, the control panel pops off, and it's got all the stuff in there. If you look at like a hard drive, I mean, we'll say the hard drive has like
it's got like chains.
It's got a bike chain in it, so it's almost like a bike game on its own. So anyway, this was a really fun and popular arcade game. So there was no doubt that it was going to get ported over, and of course a huge hit for Atari. Atari Arcade Division in the mid '80s. They were while the consumer division was crashing and burning, the Atari Arcade Division was on fire. And
right.
Like if you ever looked into the Atari history, I mean, they actually split off.
Oh yeah, there were two separate companies.
Which is really bizarre.
Yeah, after the Time Warner merger.
Yeah, that really screwed them up. So Here come Atari for the home systems. Now, I want to read this lineup just because it's amazing to me. This has got to be the most ported game we've ever covered, Bo. Just to go over a few of these. You got your Amiga version. So you're right. By the way, you're making just keep in mind this thing out in '85, so you've got your Amiga, Amstrad, Apple II, and the 2GS got it. Atari ST, the BBC Micro, BlackBerry version of this game. Remember the BlackBerry? Commodore 16, the Plus 4, the 64, DOS, the BBC Electron, the Game Boy Color, the Game Gear, the Genesis, the Lynx, the NES, the Master System, the 360, and something called the J2ME, which I don't even know what that is. Do you know what that is? So that is a ton of different systems to release on now.
Oh yeah, I know what J2ME is.
What is it?
It is the mobile operating system that was really popular in England and less popular here. It was what all the phone games ran on.
Oh,
before.
okay, great. So here it comes in 1986, published by Elite. You had Paperboy on the Specky. Now, the fellows that worked on this, I wrote down who they were and what they did. You have Steve Lamb. He amongst the things he did was Vendetta, which is pretty famous. Tony Mack, he did Back to the Future 2, Championship Sprint, and Chips Challenge, and Super Sprint. Rory C. Green, amongst the things he did was Bomb Jack 2 and Fall Guy. There it is again. Frank Bruno Boxing. There's that here again. And Coca-Tony. So a lot of the stuff that we love.
Yeah. Well, it's the same Elite team, you know.
Yeah.
In more ways than one.
Yeah. This was out. This was ready to go on the 48K. And you had your you could use a joystick or the keyboard. And the original price of this thing pretty economical. £7.95 on this boat. So, do you want to give me initial thoughts on this when you boot it up? Now, you hadn't played this, I'm assuming, until this week.
Right.
But you played the arcade version, I'm assuming.
I've played lots of different versions of this.
Okay.
So did you talk about what Paperboy was for the uninitiated?
You're a Paperboy, and you go down a street in sort of a Zaxxon perspective. What would you call that?
Three-quarters
isometric. Thank you. And you are trying to deliver your papers to the houses that are subscribers, and to everyone else you try to screw them over in some way by smashing their windows, knocking. I don't know why these people have cemeteries in their yard, but knocking over their headstones, or just generally whacking people if they get in your way.
Right.
And as you go down the street, you're avoiding stuff like dogs, people with jackhammers, drunks,
the Grim Reaper
crap rolling around,
bees,
like weird cracks in cement, skateboarders, little remote control cars, real cars, grades in the road. So there's plenty of stuff to kill you.
Right. So this game is a fairly accurate port of the spirit of the arcade original. The speed of the game is there. However, the first knock against this game is that you go two speeds in Paperboy for the ZX Spectrum: mind-numbingly slow or impossibly to control fast. There's no in between. It's like you hit up on the stick and all of a sudden you're off to the races. So that makes what's already a very difficult game even more difficult. Your setting is portrayed pretty well. Of course, your game is mostly monochromatic. The subscriber houses, the sidewalk, and you, the player character, as well as many of the hazards, are all that same sort of spectrum cyan. You do have some other colors mixed in. The non-subscriber houses are a different color, or I guess maybe they're just black. The cars are purple, but other than that, it's mostly a one-color affair. Now, the HUD does feature other colors, and at the beginning when I always pull at the end of every evening when we record the show, I always get the next week's show ready, so I download all the videos and stuff like that. And I kept seeing Atari in the HUD. And that was throwing me off to such a degree. I was like, am I looking at the wrong port of this game as I was pulling out the videos? Because it's just so weird to see the word Atari.
And a little logo.
Yeah, and the logo appear on a ZX Spectrum game. And but anyway, that's part of the HUD. I would say that the Spectrum, in order to run at this speed, maybe they had to make your field of view smaller. You've got your paper stack is portrayed on the right side. I'd say a third of the screen is not what's being played on. As you go through the levels, there were two things that I really noticed that made this game not fun for me. Okay, I am a big Paperboy guy. Okay, I grew up playing Paperboy on the venerable Nintendo Entertainment System. So much so that I have a really hard time playing the arcade version. I have a hard time with the handlebars. It's a different deal.
Yeah, it is. It's funny. I had the exact same experience after I went and played it in the arcade a couple of years ago. I was like, man, this is a whole different level of game.
But I do enjoy playing it on MAME with just normal controls with a pad or a joystick. The first thing is that they've taken out the animation of your paper either going into the mailbox or hitting the doorstep. So in the arcade and many of the other ports of this game, you can physically throw the paper into the mailbox and you see it sail into the mailbox, and then you see a little score pop up below it.
Yeah.
In this game, whenever you send your paper to its destination, if you're successful, you don't see where the paper lands. All you see is a Batman-esque score pop, or I guess it's like a comic book-esque.
Batman.
Yeah, I was thinking about the Adam West pow, You see your score pop up and it totally obscures any sort of animation. Now, you may think to yourself, well, that's not such a big deal. Well, let me tell you something. There's not a whole lot going on in Paperboy, so everything's a big deal. If you're missing that, you're missing a big part of the game. The satisfaction of seeing your paper end up where it's going. All you're doing is tossing papers in this game. That's a big part of the game.
Until the end, when you're doing jumps.
Right. Well, even in that too, you see your paper sail, and knock down a target. It's another thing. The other thing in this game is you've got to have the music. I realize we're talking about the Spectrum. We're talking about the Spectrum, and you're not going to get music. But playing this game in silence was a dreary, dreary affair. I felt like a criminal throwing papers through my non-subscribers' windows. I felt like a deviant without having that jaunty tune. Boom, 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 boom.
There's a little noise that you do hear, a little bing or ting or whatever when you toss a newspaper.
Yeah, but without that tune playing, this was a very kind of dreary
I do like
existence.
That tune. It's a good tune.
Yeah. So, as a port, I think it succeeds. As a fun game, I think it fails because of those two reasons. What do you think, Aaron?
As I'm talking to the guys before we went on the air, this is one of the games I actually have played on the C64 back in the day. And I thought the C64 had a pretty good version. It was colorful. It was blocky looking, but it was colorful, and it got it right. The specky version of this game, it can't be overstated the amount of real estate that's taken up with crap. You've got, granted, I know they did this in the interest of being able to get to run on this thing, but you've got, you said a third. I would say you're almost to where half the screen is gone, and just taken up with these stupid wastes of screen.
Right.
That paper, the garish green that shoots out, it's in stark contrast to the baby blue of the actual screen is I don't like it.
It's quite distracting.
Yeah, it is. And it's pointless. If in the arcade and certain other versions of this, they just have little papers at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, they could have easily just had a paper and then a number next to it.
You could have done anything better than that. You could picture the paperboy going like, and whenever he gets killed, hit the box on his head.
Right.
Anything. What they did was no good. And the fact that they've got the big logo at the top, and it's I go back to that Dreamcatcher article from years ago about borders. Here is your new king.
Right.
You're playing this on a postage stamp level of screen. So that is a huge flaw. Because we've played plenty of spec games by now and that weren't like this.
No.
This is just,
and they ran plenty fast.
This is just being lazy. All right, my opinion. I'm not a programmer. Now, with that said, also the color is crap. They don't even attempt to colorize the screen. It's one monochrome color. Screw you, basically. They didn't even try it. Hey, maybe they couldn't do it.
Well, here's the way I see it. They made the cars purple that are on the road.
Yeah.
What they should have done is spread that purple out amongst the rest of the things a little bit. I could have dealt with a two-color a 2-color palette.
What I would have
versus a
liked to have seen is
1-color.
take the green behind the newspapers and put those in the grass.
Yeah.
How about some green grass?
Right.
And high class forever. Now all that said, and of course the sound, and I will say, and my favorite line, this game sounds as one would expect on the ZX Spectrum, and that continues unabated.
Right.
I will say there's the jaunty tune, or some sort of jaunty tune is beeped out when you start the game, and the loading screen's pretty decent looking.
Sure.
It's got the newspaper boy. It's got the headlines that are always funny, the funny headlines. So the actual game. Take everything else and put it away, and how does it play? Well, but like Boat says, that you've got 2 speeds, really slow or pretty fast. The arcade is pretty similar. I mean, you can slow down to the crawl, or you go pretty quick. I think this plays a fair game of Paperboy. All the stuff you said is true. It is an irritant when you can't get the satisfaction of sticking that paper right in the box, but it's not a deal breaker. Most of the obstacles that you would expect are there. I don't know how far you got. I think I got to like Wednesday or something like that before I.
Yeah.
And it played like I would expect, despite the fact you're playing in a postage stamp.
Yeah, well, I mean, you are missing a couple things from the training course at the end.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, I'm expecting a cut rate version, I mean, if you're going to cut the screen down to a third, deleting some stuff from the obstacle course or some of the obstacles that you would run into.
And it's funny, too, because when you get to the end, this is something they totally could have done. You go to these, they're like bleachers, it's like a grandstand. In the arcade version, the NES version, there's a pretty good amount of people. In the Spectrum version, there's like 3 people in the stands.
And I believe in the arcade, it's like a cheer and stuff like that. But I will say they do have the obstacle course. It's pretty, it's about what you remember. And it works. I mean, so I guess what I'm saying is functionally, you're right, that is an anemic amount of, you did not draw a good crowd for Monday. Maybe it gets better. The actual game of Paperboy, if you're going to come home and play Paperboy on your Spectrum, you can do it. You can get, this will give you that Paperboy feeling.
Sure.
Is it going to be the next question is the Paperboy feeling, like the cut down version, is that good enough to keep you coming back? My answer is probably not. When you drain away the charm from the game, it's to me it's not as much fun. I mean, and something else doesn't. And again, I usually try to look at these games from the perspective of like what was going on when it came out and what are the limitations of the system. And given the limitations of this system, as far as I know it, I think this is probably a decent effort. But something in my mind tells me that it could have done much more. All right, in my opinion. And again, I'm not a programmer, but the fact that other systems were able to play this at full screen tells me that maybe they could have done that here too. We've played some games on the Spectrum that were pretty intensive, and they managed to get a bigger screen than
right.
So that's a big flaw for me.
Yeah, the way of course, this is somebody, I'm not a programmer either, but it seems to me that when you're making compromises, you should either choose between small, colorful screen or full size, monocolor. Choose one.
That's what I mean. Yeah, if they'd said, listen, this is the Spectrum. We're not going to have greens and blues and reds on the screen, but we're going to have an awesome white and black rendition of Paperboy you can play. I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, sort of like a Dark Castle, like really, really high res.
That's right. Yeah. Exactly. And there's something to be said with that. But I mean, I'm not going to kill the game because overall it plays a pretty decent game of Paperboy. Sure. You just got to be ready to accept disappointment. So I had a look at this. Now this is something I noticed. I read this. I think it was on Wiki. I can't confirm it, but according to it said the home version of this game sold more copies as a budget title than when they released it as a full price title, which I thought was interesting.
Well, when you think about it, it is an arcade port of an arcade game that was several years old at that point. I could see it more of an impulse purchase for sure.
It wasn't super long after it came out in the arcade. I will say this: if you saw this in the arcade in '85, which I did, and I thought we will never see games like this at home, and I'll be damned, they got them to the house. And so if I'm a computer owner who picked my computer up 2 or 3 years ago, and all of a sudden this comes out. I'm pretty impressed. That can't be understated. I mean, this is not the easiest game to render graphically.
Right.
It looks pretty close to what the arcade does in a monochrome way. Reviews on this bad boy. The World of Spectrum guys gave this an 8.15. Pretty good marks there. Ace gave it 5 stars. ASM gave it a 9.25 out of 10. Pretty precise measurements there. Crash gave it 88%. Computer and Video Games gave it 83%. The Computer Gamer gave it 16 out of 20. And the Happy Computer, 67%. I will say, in 1986, the Paperboy was given the award, the British Software Industry 1986 Game of the Year.
Oh my gosh!
Award. So pretty popular game.
I think they bought that. There's no way that was the game.
I'm not gonna lie to you. This was a tough game to cover for me because, like I said, normally I try to look at this stuff as I would have looked at it back then. But I think if we'd covered this in week 1 or 2. I'd probably gave it higher marks.
But now that we've seen
because I didn't think the Spectrum could pull off that much. But now that I've seen some of the big games we've seen, I think they could have done a better job. That's just me. Now, people in the know may know better than me.
Yeah. Well, we did get some Discord reviews. The one and only Chris Folds says, as a kid in the 80s, there was nothing more exciting than playing the arcade version of this after swimming lessons. Then one day to get a copy to play at home on my Specky blew my freaking mind.
Yeah.
Sure, the color is gone and the sound is weak, but the most important thing remains, the sheer fun of the game. 7.5 out of 10. Graham Vebke says, I'm going against the trend. I hated this game and still do. However, the ZX Spectrum version is more playable in my opinion than the arcade version. I agree. The sounds, well, yeah, it's easier to control.
Oh,
didn't we just have this? Yeah.
You lost me. Okay, I got what you're saying. Yeah, go ahead.
The sounds are quite poor, but the details and the graphics are all there, despite the cyan. I hope I'm saying that right. I hope it's not like Kyon or something.
Cyan, you got
cyan,
it.
right? Okay.
You never heard of that, like the crayon?
Yeah, but I mean, I've never heard somebody
Kyon?
say it, I think in my mind.
I don't know. Cyan. You go with that.
Okay. If someone enjoyed the arcade game, they would love this and scored around 7 out of 10. But for me personally, because I don't like the game, 4 out of 10.
Let's go back a second before you move on.
Okay.
You think this is? You think the home version of this are? So I'm confused as to what you're saying. They're easier to control. Is that what you're saying? So, but I mean, given if you had enough time to get used to arcade controls, they may be at least as interesting. Yeah.
Oh, interesting by far. The handlebars are a more interesting control scheme, but fine-tuned controls with that thing, it's much more difficult. Now, that said, I've played a lot more of the home versions. If I had a cab here at the house, it might be a different story.
It would be a fun one to have, too.
It would be. It's interesting. Yeah. Conversation piece.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Which is why they go for the big bucks today. And not Atari.
Sort of like Tapper.
Like that, right.
You can play it at home, but without the actual controls, it's not as cool.
Yeah. Although I did play a Tapper, and I was a little bit disappointed with the actual controls. The Tapper mechanism was not as robust as I thought it was going to be.
Well, so maybe you got maybe it's been beat down.
I think maybe it was a third-party edition. Anyway, Pixels at Dawn says, the premier newspaper delivery and vandalism simulator.
That's true.
That was what they wrote on the back of the cassette. I played this for hours on the Spectrum and have always preferred it to the arcade version. The simplicity of the design and the thrill of getting that 250 bonus for hitting the mailbox still hold up today. I still suck at the assault course section and the frame rate makes it harder to dodge some hazards, but the game starts with picks at the top of the scoreboard, so how can I complain?
Oh, man.
Interesting. The Duncan Styles says, I have never understood the popularity of Paperboy. I find it highly frustrating. While the Spectrum's graphics are basic, they move at a decent pace and it is clear what everything is. I encountered some dodgy collision detection here. The game is there and some will enjoy it, but I won't be in a rush to play this again. 5 out of 10.
It's kind of a polarizing game. Some people just don't dig it.
Yeah. Gary Heather, actual real programmer, chimes in the chat. He says the purple car is actually quite interesting. It looks like the road is a shadow mask as the Paperboy's wheels on the bike change to that color when he goes to the road off the sidewalk.
I just assumed that's kind of color clash thing. I don't know.
Well, that's what it is. He's explaining the color clash.
Oh, I got it. There you go. So I just get the dumb guy. He also gave you the thumbs up on your pronunciation of Scion.
Well, thank you. That would be the first thing that I've pronounced correctly this whole episode. I would like to thank our awesome Patreon supporters, the people that make this fine show continue on to its 27th week. Can you believe we've been doing this show 27 weeks so far?
So it feels like at least 6 times that much.
Laurent Giroux, Gary Heather, speaking of which, Eric Nelson, Harbonaut, Graham Vebke, Frodo NL, Tapes from the Crypt, Pixels at Dawn, Chris Folds, Paul Harrington, and Christopher Hassall. Thank you guys so much for supporting Our Sinclair. And I also want to thank
Good man.
all the fine folks in the chat, the live chat, the YouTube chat, Gary Heather, 10-Minute Amiga Retrocast, Youssef Salim, Jan Holbro Rasmussen,
Good name there.
Card 2005, and Duncan Stiles and Ricky DeRocher. Thank you guys for hanging out with us.
Thousands.
Absolutely. We enjoy taping the show live and hope you can join us whenever you can. And if you can't, thanks for listening on whatever you're listening.
We need
on.
the live chat to correct our pronunciation and our many mistakes.
True. Next week, Aaron, we're going to be playing Pixels at Dawn's favorite game. He told me this a long time ago on one of my original Spectrum streams when we first got the Specky from Huck.
Is it Paperboy 2?
It's not Paperboy 2. It's another mounted vehicle game. I'm talking about ATV simulator.
Oh my!
As residents of West Virginia, who else more qualified to review an ATV game?
I spend many of my evenings out mudding in the back 40 on my ATV.
That's right. Back roads are bogging up, as they say.
Is that what they say? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I listen to country music. I know how
That's
they
hard
talk.
to believe, Bo.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week. Until then, rewind tape
And press play.